No sooner than the announcements of the new presidential election results were made than the PF Cadres disappeared from the markets and bus station. The immediate thought? A new regime of Cadres are taking over. The Greens were out and in were the Reds. My name is Francesca Piribanda and welcome to this week's episode of The Digest. Now, pursuant to the Markets and Bus Stations Act of 2007 of the laws of Zambia, the management of bus stations countrywide is a preserve of the local authorities. And to stress the point, allow me to quote in part 2 of the said act under section 5, and in part it reads, all markets and bus stations shall be under the control of the local authority, having jurisdiction in the area which they are situated. End of quote. But why was this law neglected? Will the City Council under the new Dawn government sustainably enforce it? On the Digest this week, is a cadre-free markets and bus station going to be a reality? Watch this. Every government's desire aims at ensuring sanity, orderliness and observance of rules and the law in management of our markets and bus stations in Zambia. Following the coming in of the new Dawn government, President Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND party spokesperson have publicly made pronouncements denouncing cadreism, which was rampant in markets and bus stations in the past regimes. The Digest team engaged some stakeholders, including the city fathers. Danny Chiwinda, Director of Housing and Social Services, Lusaka City Council, is responsible for managing a number of services and facilities, one of them being markets and bus stations. His authority is backed by law and an Act of Parliament, Act number 7 of 2007.
Okay, so we have an Act of Parliament, that is Act number 7 of 2007, called the Market and Bus Station Act. So Section 5 of that Act is very clear. It gives the mandate to the local authority in whose jurisdiction these markets and bus stations fall to manage them. And actually it goes beyond just management, even establishing markets, managing them. That whole mandate is given to the local authority. So by managing these facilities, it means issues of providing services to these facilities such as water, electricity, waste collection, issues of collecting revenue from these facilities, and any other developments, whether infrastructure or whatever committees that will operate in these markets, they need to have the blessings of the council.
So then begs the question, how did the council lose its authority to cadres when they are backed by law and mandated to enforce it?
Okay, so basically having the law in place is one thing. Enforcing it is another. So when it comes to issues of law enforcement, you know that the council is just one piece of the whole puzzle. There are other players involved. It involves our parent ministry, Ministry of Local Government. It involves the law enforcement agencies and the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the political party players that we have in place, the traders themselves, the bus operators. All these have a role to play to ensure that the enforcement of the law is not just left to one entity. So the issue of cadres coming into these markets, I wouldn't say was as a result of the council not taking their mandate seriously. It was because of other stakeholders that probably had an upper hand on those of us that are mandated to run these facilities. What I can say is, for example, if you send council staff to say, go and operate in such and such a place, and then they encounter weather violence, and that violence is reported elsewhere, no action is taken. What happens is those officers become, I would say, discouraged, or they don't work according to what is prescribed, whether in their conditions of service, because at some point, not everyone was pulling in the same direction. People were pulling in different directions because of different interests. So I would say that is what was a precursor to the council not having total control on such kind of facilities. The issue of people with different interests who are supposed to work together to provide a conducive trading and operating environment for the traders and bus operators, including, of course, the passengers and the people that go to these markets to purchase whatever merchandise they need.
Frank Mupila Kamea is the president for the Zambia National Marketeers and Credit Association, Zanamaka, which was formed in 2005 with the objective to emancipate people in the informal sector, particularly the marketeers, traders, the small-scale farmers, including the bus and taxi drivers. Zanamaka president is elated to the fact that cadres have been removed from the markets and bus stations and refers to it as empowerment to the informal sector.
In the first place, we would like to thank the Almighty God and, of course, appreciate for giving us one, His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, because of the very fact that God saw the challenges that our people in the informal sector were facing way back in 1964 in the Kaunda regime, where we had the vigilantes invested in all these markets, bus stations, and the MMD also coped the same. We had the cadres and the PF also. They had the cadres in these markets, called the commander ones and all those in these areas and the bus stations. This indeed has been a challenge for a long time, and huge sums of monies were deprived of our people and making the informal sector very vulnerable and very poor. And so it has been a blessing that the cadres have been removed from these markets, which I think is going to change the scenario this time around. That in itself is an empowerment to the Zambian people, because every marketeer fight on their own. No one has ever given them anything in terms of capitalization for them to come in the market. And so we had these people that were getting free money, and our governments by then were just looking at that. At some point we found ourselves into parliament just to talk to these MPs, because in every constituency there are markets. No one was coming to our aid. And thank God that he identified one, Hakainde Hichilema. And the first assignment that he did was to listen from God. Because when the people are crying, if you're a leader, you must listen. And you have to act. If you don't act, you lose out your credibility. And we thank God when the Zambians, went into the ballot box, they elected someone who can sort out their problem. And so our markets are, there's a lot of sanity this time around. And as an association, I think it gives us a clear roadmap, because much of our projects, much of our programs, I'll give an example of, the best tax that was introduced. That's, statutory, program, where every marketeer, the 6 million plus people in the informal sector, particularly the informal sector, must contribute best tax at 1 kwacha, which means that Zambia, as a government, can collect 6 million kwacha per day. That's huge sums of money. Multiply that by 30 days. That's huge sums of money. And the pension scheme, NAPSA, which was also introduced, which we were appointed as an association to reach out in all these markets across the country to educate the people so that all of them can benefit from this national development. All these things were hindered by, the cadres who infested our markets. And so the time when Hakainde Hichilema has removed these cadres, I think all these programs must be resumed so that our country can create this, revenue. And going forward, I think this will help the country not to borrow monies from outside the country, because most of the monies that our country is borrowing we are borrowing taxpayers' money from other people or other countries. So we can generate our own money for this country. And we believe as an association, Zanamaka, that Hakainde Hichilema has not brought freedom only for people to fold hands, and wait for him to do what they expect to do, them to do. But he has brought freedom for us to participate, to be part of the national development, to bring ideas together, our skills, work together so that we develop our country. It was so bad, and it was more or less like we're in the colonial era, because we had no freedom. Each time a marketeer wants space, you end up paying about 5,000 kwacha, maybe 1 meter by 1 meter, and you pay to these so-called commanders. There was a lot of lawlessness. No one, regarded the policeman. No one regarded our men and women in uniform. That situation was really critical. And each time a marketeer, when any other citizen may have a problem, you go to police. It was not very easy to be supported by the police because the police had no power. And that was the kind of a situation. We were all living in fear, and we lost a lot of property. I'm sure you're aware that some of the markets were gutted, like there were city markets in Ndola. Most of the markets were gutted. There was no compensation for our people, the marketeers. And it was not even known who did that and who was doing that. And so those are kind of situations. But I believe with the new Dawn government, I think those things may not be tolerated, because this is a government for the people. At that time, it was a government for the minority, because only a few people were benefiting from the national cake.
Spokesperson for Bus and Taxi Owners Association of Zambia, Ms. Daudi, equally is delighted that the hooligans have been removed from the market and bus stations, particularly because the members of the association were hard hit by the illegal party functionaries.
To start with, let me say the Bus and Taxi Owners Association of Zambia has been the major interest carrier for bus and taxi operators across the country. Over the years, we have faced a number of difficulties in operations, and one of those was interference in the business practices in the stations. We've had a situation where people masquerading as party functionaries, or you'd call them now cadres, would just come to the station and start wanting to take over the running of the stations and extorting money from operators. They would usually come and say, we are from the party. They would even sometimes wear party regalia and demand to be paid some money, which they said was going to the party. And sometimes they would demand money, which they just put in their pockets. And they would even organize, I would say, hooligans in the stations who would just say, for instance, at the Lusaka Intercity Bus Terminus, bring a passenger and say, pay me so much for bringing a passenger, and demanding what they would usually call junta. So this was a subtraction of income, on the part of operators, and sometimes we would even have conflict. Where an operator is unable to pay, they would even ban that operator from entering the bus station or operating from the bus station. We've seen situations where even in the townships where they would demand money from a bus, and when the money is not paid, they would attack and beat up even bus drivers. So it was like you have a mini war with those who were hooligans, who used to call themselves party functionaries. Now with the advent of the new Dawn government, in fact, I should congratulate His Excellency Mr. Hakainde Hichilema on his resounding victory in the August 15 election. I think he has already started pronouncing policy directions for the nation You know, he has addressed the nation twice, and on those two occasions, he's touched on a number of economic policies that he hopes to, undertake in his new government. And one of those is to remove cadreism. And this cadreism has been operating in bus stations, has been operating in markets. And that pronouncement, which is a policy directive to the nation, is very welcome, particularly on the part of us bus and taxi operators who are always in the station, whose offices are actually those stations. So we've seen that with the new Dawn government, under His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, this thing will become a thing of the past. And what we expect is a return of normalcy, sanity, order, law and order, obedience of law and order in the stations, and this is what will enhance, the business profile of the transport sector. And when that is enhanced, it means there will be growth in the sector. People would have sufficient incomes, which may even enable someone to borrow money and reinvest in the sector. And this is a true growth, that we really want. Additional to that, this mushrooming of illegal bus stations was largely driven by the so-called cadres, who would just spring up in a place and mount a loading bay for buses outside the normal gazetted bus stations. And from there, they would now line up illegal vehicles, buses that are not registered, taxis that are not registered, and then capture people and get them onto these buses, and the taxis which are illegal. So it affected the flow of passengers into legitimate bus stations. It affected the flow of passengers into legitimate bus operators. And this had an impact of taking away revenues, killing the legitimate business operations of law-abiding citizens of this country.
The Commuters' Rights Association of Zambia was formed in 2002, and President of the association, Aaron Kamuti, intimates that the association came into being because commuters' rights were not protected.
The whole idea for the formation of the Commuters' Rights Association of Zambia, it came from the background of the same cadres. We used to have PTA, BDMTA, UTTA. All these institutions, they are their interests. They were representing the operators, the bus drivers, and also the owners of the groups, the grouping. So the commuters, the passengers, they didn't have any representation. That's how we came into being. If you remember, in the early 2000, we used to have BDMTA, which were controlling the bus stations. Even the police had no power. If you go at intercity bus terminals, there were a lot of so-called cadres. By then, it was MMD in power, where we had people very powerful, more than the law itself. They were operating these facilities. So from there, we thought of, no, we need to protect the interests of the passengers, because without a passenger, they can't be the operator. Without the passenger, there can't be any of these vessels we are seeing, the buses. Now, these buses, they are supposed to pick passengers, and that's how they were making the money. And the money they were getting from these bus stations comes from the passengers. So we formed this association in 2002. That's when we were registered. And then we started representing the passengers. Although it wasn't easy, we had a tough time positioning ourselves, because, as like I've alluded, that BDMTA was very strong, more than the law itself, the law of this country. They would control everything, starting from bus station to bus stops. And also they had power to control the facilities for the local authority, meaning the bus station and bus stops, where they were collecting money. And these monies were being abused to buy drugs, beers, and also insulting the passengers. They can just wake up in a day to say, we're going to adjust the bus fares, and they will do it. No one will stop them. So we thought we had the interest to protect. And we started engaging ourselves with them, and they understand what we wanted to do. We just wanted to see sanity in this sector, so that we have the interest to protect and also they are their interest to protect. If you remember way back, we used to sit on a Toyota S bus where you sit facing each other. We were used to squeeze beyond the normal seating capacity. 5 passengers on a 4-seater bus. Now all this came to a stop because of us. We started engaging the Minister in charge of transport, meaning the Minister of Transport and Communication. By then we didn't have RATSA. RATSA was not there. So we started engaging the minister, the PS, and then there was that recognition that our interests, which we are doing, protect the interests of the passengers, was recognized. And then we started working together with BDMTA. Wherever there is a meeting, consultative meetings on transport, whether they want to adjust the bus fares, we'll be there sitting on behalf of the passengers. We'll negotiate on behalf of the passengers. And from then, we went together, doing everything together, meaning bringing sanity on this sector without the local authority. The councils are no power. We try to put the council on board where we organize committees. At Lusaka City Council Civic Center, we had a committee for stakeholders on transport and the operators. I was the secretary for that committee. At Force Headquarters, we had a committee, the Zambia Police Traffic Department, where we engaged the traffic officers to see how we can work the way they mount checkpoints and roadblocks where it's not even necessary. So we tried to reason with them how to go about it. Now from that background, BDMTA was deregistered, PTA went, UTTA went, we remained. And then things just go the other way around, where we now had cadres in power of all these bus stations and bus stops, which was a challenge. Not even government would come in and stop that kind of nonsense from our bus stations and bus stops, because they had more power than anything, because they were belonging to the ruling party, and most of them, they were just criminals. They were pretending to be party or loyal members of the ruling party, from MMD to PF. So you see from that background, it was very, very difficult to do things in bus stations and markets. There was total infringement, because you see, if you look at our constitution and even the Road Transport Act number 11 of 2002, a passenger has a right to choose the bus of your choice. You can board a bus which you want. If you feel this bus is not comfortable or this bus is inconvenience, you rather choose a bus you want to board. But it was very difficult, because you'll be told the bus you need to board. You'll be forced, which is against the law, which is against the Road Transport Act. It's against the constitution of this country, where everyone has got the right of freedom of movement, the right to choose what you want to do, or what you want to decide what you want to do. So all these were not there because of the same infringement of rights and the rights of movement by the cadres. If you go in bus stations, you saw what used to happen. People were being harassed, abused. You'll be forced to board a bus not of your choice. You are with your family. You'll be made to separate with your family. This one will go this side, this one will be taken this side, the luggage is going somewhere else. This is total abuse of one's rights. Like I've alluded to the act itself, no one should force someone, toting itself, that shouting to someone to board a bus, that's a serious offense. We never used to see all these laws applying. Forcing someone to board a bus not of your choice, that's a very serious offense. The owner of that bus can even be reprimanded, or is the operation license retrieved because of failing to follow that kind of law. So all these never used to happen in the time of the cadres, because they had more powers than the law itself.
Like I said, there was a lot of lawlessness, and these cadres were getting authority from their bosses. All right, we sort of lived in the area of in the times of Pharaoh, where you cannot say anything. It is your money, it is your business, and you cannot say anything. You can imagine our people used to pay 3 to 4 times a day. When the small-scale farmers are bringing the produce to the market at 03, we had cadres who waylaid them, and they were able to pay, to ask those, small-scale farmers pay for bringing the trucks in those markets across the country. Here we're talking about across the country. It's not only Soweto, the whole country. The trend was the same. And there were other cadres also. For you to offload the goods into the market, you have to pay. That's the second, illegal levy. And then at 06, again, you have the cadres that come in to sell your goods, to sell on behalf. You have no power, you have no authority. And then at 10 hours, now you have the council to come and collect their levies. You can imagine that situation. It means that everyone was doing their business at a loss. There was nothing happening. But you cannot live without engaging yourself into anything. So people were just coming, people were just buying and reselling, but there was nothing much coming out of that, and because of these minority groups that were collecting these monies. So it was terrible. Yes, it was quite terrible.
Indeed, I would say that the problem wasn't just with the council markets, but probably the extent to which the cadres penetrated the council markets was very high. Of course, they even went into some cooperative markets. I can give an example of Kazmai market, where they had to make the committee that was there sign an agreement with them, handwritten, indicating that they will collect money on such and such days, and the cadres will collect on such and such days. But the problem was rampant in the council-managed markets and bus stations. And the reason is the stakes are higher in the facilities that are managed by the council. For example, intercity, city market, if you look at the volumes of buses and people that are found there, it means the stakes are very high. Even the amount of money which they were able to obtain illegally, of course, was higher than going to a market, say, which is in the Kanyama, for example. So that is the reason we've had this problem.
Exactly, because whatever efforts we were trying to put across, they were never aid. We would have consultative meetings, but can you invite a cadre to a consultative meeting? We engage RATSA, who are the custodian of the Act, Lusaka City Council, who are the custodian of the Market and Bus Station Act of 2007, which never applied from the time it was constituted. So all these were challenges, because we cannot just stand up and say, what is what we want to do. Passengers were loaded beyond the normal seating capacity. Passengers were scared even to go into these bus stations. They would rather board a bus where it's not legally a recognized bus stop or a bus station, because to get scared of boarding a bus. Operators at one point, those buses who are coming outside the country, they used to go into bus stations because you pay for even a small luggage. You'll be made to pay because of the same cadres. So they would rather offload passengers outside the legally registered bus station because they were scared to use these facilities. We've waited for this for too long, and there can never be a better time than now. We thought the previous governments who have a political will, because it's only a political will. If the president has spoken, that's the way to go. Any law cannot go beyond the president. If the president said this is nuisance, it's nuisance. And this is what has happened in the UPND government, which we appreciate. UPND spokesperson, Cornelius Muito, have said no cadreism. All those cadres who are portraying or who are pretending to align themselves to UPND, those are criminals. The president has stated very clearly in all his statements, especially the day of the inaugural, he took it upon himself to say, as I stand as the president of this country, I don't want this kind of nonsense coming back to these facilities, markets and bus stations. This will be the thing of the past, meaning that has gone with PF. Because of the cadres, that's what had made even the PF to go. Because cadres had more powers than anyone else. Cadres had more power than the police, than the law enforcers. So politics have a role to play to bring sanity in this country. Politics have a major, they are the major stakeholders, politicians are the major stakeholders to bring sanity in this country. Now, if you talk of transport, this is a drive of the economy of any country, because we see different people boarding these buses, bringing or helping this country to grow in terms of economically, because these people are going for work. Now, we saw what used to happen where people are being infringed upon their rights of movement, people are being insulted while you're going for work. On a bus, you are insulted, you are already disturbed before you reach your respective destination. So with the stopping of cadres mushrooming these facilities, the markets and bus stations, I think this will help bring sanity in these facilities. And with the new government, hopefully, this will stand, that we will never see the cadres coming back in bus stations and markets. Because as Commuters' Rights Association of Zambia, we fought for this, and it has come to pass. We'll give this government the support it needs, because we've got that vast experience to understand the happenings in these bus stations and markets. And our appeal is to the local authority. Let them bring back the Market and Bus Station Act of 2007, so that we should have boards in all major bus stations to overlook the activities of the bus stations. And we are going to do the checks and balances, how these monies will be collected in these facilities, so that the economy of this country would grow, because there are a lot of monies which are being collected in these facilities. If you talk of intercity bus terminals every day collects about 310,000 kwacha every day. Now talk of a month. A cadre or a group of cadre, they used to go every day with 210,000 kwacha. Council will remain with 100,000 kwacha. They had a very serious problem even to pay the salaries for their workers. They had serious problems even to do other social issues or doing some works which are supposed to be done, because they didn't have money. Now, if you look at Korima Tower, is run by the local authority. Korima Tower makes about 280, 250 every day. If you talk of City Market, it's the same amount. Now, if you can make 250,000 every day, that's a lot of money. Now, you look at where we are coming from. All that money used to go in wrong hands. They buy drugs, they buy alcohol, insulting the passengers. Now, with the political will, which we have now, I think we will go into the right direction. We will support the move by the UPNT government, we will support the move by the local authority of removing the cadres.
This is kind of like it's benefiting a lot of people.
The reality is that bus stations and markets can indeed operate without cadre interference. It is therefore the responsibility of all stakeholders to unite in making sure that the law is upheld and protected. That is your digest for today. Give us your feedback by emailing us documentaries@diamondtvzambia.com. On behalf of my crew, my name is Francesca Peribanda. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.